She stepped off the stage into the Wyoming dust with a forged letter in her pocket and a wedding dress in her trunk, only to discover the man she'd traveled 2,000 miles to marry didn't exist. The ranch was abandoned, the promises were lies, and the wilderness didn't care that she had nowhere left to go. But when a stranger rode in with a loaded rifle and a terrible truth, Evelyn Harper realized something worse. She wasn't the first woman this man had destroyed. She was just the only one still alive to do something about it. If you want to see how a woman with nothing left to lose became the thing her enemy feared most, stay with me until the end, and drop a like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The stage lurched to a stop, and Evelyn Harper felt her stomach drop with it. She'd been clutching the letter for 3 hours straight, the paper soft and damp from her fingers. The ink had smudged at the edges where she'd traced his words over and over, trying to hold on to something solid. My dearest Evelyn, the ranch is ready. I am ready. Come to me and we will begin our life together. The driver's voice came down rough from the box. Cross Hill Station, miss. End of the line. Evelyn pushed the curtain aside and looked out. There was nothing. No town. No buildings. Just a sagging wooden structure that might have been a trading post once. Its roof caved in on one side. Beyond it, the land stretched flat and pale under a sky so big it made her feel like an insect. Wind kicked up dust devils that spun themselves out against the sagebrush. She sat very still. "Who's miss?" The driver was already hauling her trunk off the back. It hit the ground with a thud that made her wince. Everything she owned was in there. Her mother's quilt, the blue dress she'd sewn for the wedding, 3 books, a cameo brooch. She climbed down carefully, smoothing her skirt. The hem was already gray with trail dust. Her boots, new ones, bought special, sank slightly into the dirt. "Where's the ranch?" she asked. The driver squinted at her. He was an older man, face like tanned leather, and he looked at her the way you'd look at someone who'd just asked a stupid question. "What ranch?" "The Holloway Ranch. Mr. Daniel Holloway. He sent for me." "Lady, I don't know any Holloway, and there ain't no ranch within 10 miles of here." Her throat tightened. "That's not possible." He shrugged. "Possible or not, that's how it is." He climbed back up to the box, gathering the reins. "Stage comes back through in 4 days. You want to ride out? You be here at dawn." "Wait." But he didn't wait. The horses leaned into their harnesses and the stage rolled forward, wheels creaking. She stood there in the road watching it go, watching the dust settle, watching the only link to civilization disappear into the empty western distance. 4 days. She turned slowly, taking it in. The trading post. The well with its broken bucket. A fence that had fallen over and never been set right. No people, no smoke, no sound except the wind. Evelyn walked to the trading post and pushed the door. It swung open, hinges screaming. Inside it was dim and smelled like rot and old leather. The counter was still there, and shelves lined the walls, but everything was gone. Picked clean or taken when whoever ran this place gave up and left. She sat down on the floor, right there in the doorway, and pulled the letter out again. "Come to me, and we will begin our life together." She'd gotten 3 letters total. The first had come in May, 6 months ago, delivered to the boarding house in Philadelphia where she worked. She hadn't known Daniel Holloway, but he'd known her, or said he did. A friend of a friend. He'd written about Wyoming, about wide skies and good land, about building something that mattered. He'd written like a man who thought carefully before he put pen to paper. The second letter had come in July. That one was warmer. He'd asked about her family, her interests, her dreams. She'd written back. It felt strange at first, talking to a man she'd never met, but his words made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. When the third letter came in September with a proposal of marriage and money for the journey, she'd said yes. Because what did she have in Philadelphia? A rented room, a job scrubbing floors, a future that looked exactly like her present, stretching out flat and gray until she was too old to scrub anymore. She'd wanted more than that. Now she sat in the ruins of a trading post 1,000 miles from anywhere, and the only thing she had more of was dust. Evelyn folded the letter and put it back in her pocket. She stood, brushed off her skirt, and went outside to drag her trunk into the shade. The sun was already brutal. She found the well and lowered the broken bucket, pulling up water that tasted like metal but was cold enough. She drank, then soaked her handkerchief and pressed it to the back of her neck. 4 days. She could survive 4 days. She went back into the trading post and searched it properly this time. There was a back room with a table and a chair that wobbled, a rusted pot-bellied stove, a shelf with 3 tins of beans, their labels peeled and faded. She opened one. It smelled fine. She ate it cold, scraping the bottom with her fingers because there was no spoon. When the sun started to drop, she pulled her trunk inside and locked the door. Not that the lock would stop anyone, but it made her feel incrementally safer. She spread her mother's quilt on the floor, lay down, and stared at the ceiling beams until the light bled out of the sky. She didn't cry. She wanted to, but nothing came. What came instead was anger. Not the hot, wild kind. The cold kind. The kind that sat in her chest like a stone and whispered that someone had done this to her on purpose. Someone had written those letters. Someone had taken her money. She'd sent $20 ahead for supplies. Someone had known she'd come and hadn't cared what happened when she got here. Evelyn closed her eyes and made herself breathe slowly. Tomorrow she'd figure it out. Tomorrow she'd think. Tonight she just had to get through the dark. She woke to the sound of a horse. It was still night, or close enough. Pre-dawn gray seeping through the cracks in the walls. She sat up fast, heart pounding. Hoofbeats, slow and steady, coming closer. She stood and moved to the window, staying back from the opening. A man on horseback, silhouette dark against the pale sky. Tall in the saddle. He rode right up to the well, swung down, and let the horse drink. Then he turned and looked directly at the trading post. Evelyn froze. He didn't move for a long moment, just stood there, reins loose in one hand. Then he walked toward the door. She grabbed the only thing she had, a broken broom handle leaning in the corner, and held it like a club. The door rattled. "Anybody in there?" His voice was low, rough-edged. Not threatening, exactly, but not friendly either. She didn't answer. "I saw the trunk," he said, "and the stage tracks are fresh, so unless you died overnight, you're in there." Evelyn swallowed. "What do you want?" "To know what the hell you're doing at Cross Hill Station. Nobody's used this place in 2 years. I'm waiting for the stage. Stage ain't back for 4 days." "I know that." Silence. Then, "You got food? Enough? Water?" "Yes." Another pause. She heard him sigh. "All right. I'm going to step back. You can open the door or not. I don't care. But if you're out here because some man told you to come, you need to know you got swindled." Her hands tightened on the broom handle. "What?" "You heard me." She crossed to the door, unlatched it, and pulled it open a crack. The man standing there was maybe 35, maybe 40. Hard to tell. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been through weather and trouble and come out the other side meaner for it. Dark hair under a battered hat, a scar running through one eyebrow. He wore a long coat despite the heat, and she could see the edge of a rifle strapped to his saddle. He looked her over once, quick and assessing, then shook his head. "Yeah, that's what I thought." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Means you got taken, same as the others." Evelyn's stomach twisted. "What others?" "The other women who came out here looking for Daniel Holloway." The ground seemed to tilt under her feet. She gripped the doorframe. "You know him?" "I know of him, and I know he don't exist." "That's not—" She stopped. Her voice sounded thin even to herself. "I have letters." "So did they." "Who are you?" "Name's Rowan Hale." He tipped his hat back slightly, meeting her eyes. "And I've been tracking the man who wrote you those letters for the better part of 3 years. She stared at him. The words didn't make sense. Or they did, but she didn't want them to. "He's not a rancher," Rowan said. "He's a con man. Writes letters to women back east, makes promises, takes their money, and disappears. Sometimes he just leaves them stranded like you. Sometimes—" He trailed off, jaw tight. "Sometimes it's worse." Evelyn felt something crack open inside her chest. Not sadness, rage. "How many?" she asked. "That I know of? 8, but I'd bet money there's more." "And you haven't caught him?" Rowan's expression darkened. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because he's smart. Changes his name, changes his story, uses different post offices, never stays in one place long enough to pin down." He glanced past her into the trading post. "You got a name? Evelyn Harper?" Well, Miss Harper, I'm sorry this happened to you, but you got two choices now. You can get back on that stage in 4 days and go home, or you can help me catch the son of a bitch who did this. She looked at him, really looked. There was no pity in his face, no condescension, just a blunt, tired kind of honesty. Help you how? She asked. Same way he caught you, with bait. Evelyn stepped outside, letting the door swing shut behind her. The sky was lightning now, pink and gold creeping over the horizon. Rowan's horse stamped and blew air through its nose. You want to use me to lure him out, she said. If you're willing. And if I'm not? Then I'll keep looking, but it'll take longer, and in the meantime, he'll do this to someone else. She thought about the letters, the careful words, the way he'd made her feel like she mattered. She thought about the $20 she'd sent, the dress in her trunk, the 2,000 miles she'd traveled on a lie. What's in it for you? She asked. Rowan's face went cold. He killed my sister. The words hung in the air between them, flat and final. Evelyn felt her breath catch. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Help me stop him. She looked out at the empty land, the long stretch of nothing in every direction. 4 days until the stage came back. 4 days to decide whether to run home with her tail between her legs or do something that might actually mean something. She turned back to Rowan. What do I have to do? He almost smiled. Almost. First thing, you come with me. My place is about 6 miles north. You'll be safe there while we figure out the plan. How do I know I can trust you? You don't. He walked to his horse and gathered the reins. But you're out of options, Miss Harper. So you got a choice to make. Evelyn looked at the trading post, at her trunk sitting in the dirt, at the miles of wilderness pressing in on all sides. Then she looked at Rowan Hale. All right, she said. Let's go. He nodded once, then swung up into the saddle. He reached down. Give me your hand. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was strong, calloused. He pulled her up behind him like she weighed nothing, and she grabbed onto his coat to steady herself. Trunk? She asked. I'll come back for it. He kicked the horse into motion, and they rode north into the breaking day. Evelyn didn't look back. The ride took over an hour. Rowan didn't talk and Evelyn didn't push. She held onto his coat and watched the land change. Flat scrub giving way to low hills, then rocky outcrops, then finally a shallow valley with a creek running through it. The ranch sat at the edge of the creek. It wasn't much. A small cabin, a barn that leaned slightly to one side, a corral with 3 horses. But it looked lived in, solid, real. Rowan dismounted and helped her down. It's not fancy, he said. It's fine. He tied the horse and led her inside. The cabin was one room with a loft, a fireplace, a table, a bed in the corner. Clean, but spare. He gestured to the table. Sit. I'll make coffee. She sat. Watched him move around the small space with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. He got the fire going, set a pot to boil, and pulled out 2 tin cups. When the coffee was ready, he poured and handed her one. She wrapped her hands around it, grateful for the warmth. Tell me about your sister, she said. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Her name was Claire. She was 23. Sweet kid. Too sweet. He sat down across from her. She got letters from a man calling himself Thomas Grant. Same story. Rancher, looking for a wife. Good land, fresh start. She went to meet him in Colorado. I told her not to go alone. She went anyway. He paused, staring into his cup. They found her body 3 weeks later. She'd been robbed, beaten, and left in a ditch outside Denver. Evelyn felt sick. I'm so sorry. The law didn't care. Said she'd made a foolish choice, got what was coming, so I started looking myself. He met her eyes. Took me 6 months to find the pattern. Different names, different towns, but the same method. He's been doing this for years. And you've been chasing him ever since. Yeah. Why hasn't he been caught? Because he's careful, and because most of the women he targets don't report it. They're ashamed, or scared, or they just want to forget. He set his cup down. But you're still here. That tells me you're not the forgetting type. No, Evelyn said quietly. I'm not. Rowan leaned back in his chair, studying her. You understand what you're signing on for? This won't be easy, and it won't be safe. I understand. He's dangerous, Miss Harper. He's killed before. He'll kill again if he thinks you're a threat. Then we won't let him know I'm a threat until it's too late. Something shifted in Rowan's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You got steel in you. I didn't used to. She looked down at her hands, still wrapped around the cup. But I'm learning. He nodded slowly. All right, then here's how this works. You stay here. Help around the place, keep your head down. I'll reach out through the usual channels, post offices, stage stations, and let it be known you're still looking for Holloway, that you're waiting for him. You think he'll come? If he thinks you've got money left, yeah, he'll come, or he'll send someone. Rowan's face hardened. Either way, we'll be ready. Evelyn felt a strange, cold calm settle over her. This wasn't the life she'd imagined when she left Philadelphia, but it was the life she had now. Teach me to shoot, she said. Rowan raised an eyebrow. You ever held a gun? No? Then we start tomorrow. The days fell into a rhythm. Mornings, Evelyn worked. She mended the fence, hauled water, learned to manage the horses. Rowan was a hard teacher, didn't coddle, didn't praise, but he was fair. When she did something right, he'd nod. When she messed up, he'd show her how to fix it. Afternoons, he taught her to shoot. The first time she fired a rifle, the recoil nearly knocked her on her ass. Rowan caught her by the elbow, steadied her, and said, Again. She did it again. And again. And again until her shoulder ached and her ears rang. You're pulling left, he said. Keep your breathing steady. Squeeze, don't jerk. She adjusted, fired. The tin can on the fence post flew backward. Rowan grunted. Better. By the end of the second week, she could hit the target more often than not. By the end of the third, she didn't need him to tell her what she was doing wrong. One evening, as the sun dropped low and painted the valley gold, Rowan sat on the porch cleaning his rifle. Evelyn came out with 2 cups of coffee and handed him one. Thank you, he said. She sat beside him. For what? For not running. She smiled faintly. Where would I go? Back east, home, somewhere safe. There's no such thing as safe, she said. Not really. You just pick which risks are worth taking. He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he went back to his rifle. You're different than I expected. How so? Most women in your position would have fallen apart by now. I did fall apart, Evelyn said quietly. You just didn't see it. He didn't answer, but she felt him listening. I spent the first 3 days here crying in the barn, she continued. I felt humiliated, stupid, like I'd thrown my whole life away for nothing. She took a sip of coffee. But then I realized something. I didn't lose my life. I left it, and maybe that's not the same thing. Rowan set the rifle down. You got more fight in you than most men I know. I don't feel like I'm fighting. I feel like I'm just trying not to drown. That's what fighting is. She turned to look at him. His face was hard, lined with old grief and older anger. But there was something else there, too. Something almost gentle. Do you think we'll catch him? She asked. Yeah, I do. And then what? Then he answers for what he's done. Will that bring your sister back? Rowan's expression darkened. No. But it'll stop him from taking someone else's. Evelyn nodded. She understood that. Justice wasn't about fixing the past. It was about making sure the future looked different. They sat in silence as the stars came out, one by one, until the sky was full of them. The message came 5 weeks after Evelyn arrived. Rowan rode into the yard at midday, his face tight. He swung down from the horse and handed her a folded paper. From the stage station, he said. Came in this morning. She opened it. Miss Harper, I apologize for the delay in meeting you. I was called away on urgent business, but I have returned. If you are still willing, I would very much like to see you. There is a town called Ridgefield, 2 days' ride south. Meet me there on the 14th. Yours, Daniel Holloway. Evelyn's hands shook. She read it again, then looked up at Rowan. It's him. Yeah. He thinks I'm still waiting. That's what we wanted him to think. She folded the letter carefully. The 14th. That's in 3 days. Rowan nodded. We leave tomorrow. I'll ride with you as far as Ridgefield, but I'll stay out of sight. You go in alone, meet him, and keep him talking. I'll be close. The second he makes a move, I'm there. And if he doesn't make a move, then we follow him, see where he goes, who he talks to. Rowan's eyes were hard. One way or another, Miss Harper, this ends in Ridgefield. Evelyn looked down at the letter again. The handwriting was the same. Neat, careful. The words were warm. It made her want to scream. I'm ready, she said. Rowan met her gaze. I know you are. They left at dawn. Evelyn rode one of Rowan's horses, a steady mare that didn't spook easy. She wore the blue dress she'd packed for the wedding, not because she wanted to, but because it was what Daniel Holloway would expect. Her rifle was strapped to the saddle, hidden under a blanket. Rowan rode beside her, quiet and watchful. The land stretched out around them, wide and wild. Evelyn had grown used to it over the past weeks. The silence, the space, the way the sky seemed to press down on everything. It didn't scare her anymore. What scared her was what waited at the end of this ride. On the second day, as the sun began to set, Rowan reined his horse to a stop on a low ridge. Below them, a town spread out in the valley. Small, maybe 24 buildings. Smoke rising from chimneys. Ridgefield. That's it, Rowan said. Evelyn stared down at the town. Somewhere down there, the man who'd destroyed her life was waiting. What if he recognizes that I know? She asked. He won't. Men like him think they're smarter than everyone else. That's their weakness. And if I freeze? Rowan turned to look at her. You won't. How do you know? Because you didn't freeze when you were stranded at Cross Hill. You didn't freeze when I showed up. You didn't freeze when I put a rifle in your hands. He reached over and gripped her shoulder, firm and steady. You're stronger than he is, Evelyn. You just don't know it yet. She took a breath, held it, let it out slow. Then she nodded. Let's go, she said. They rode down into Ridgefield as the last light bled out of the sky. Ridgefield had one hotel, and it looked like it had been standing since before the war. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged in the middle, and the sign out front creaked in the wind. Evelyn dismounted in front of it and tied her horse while Rowan stayed back in the shadows across the street. She could feel his eyes on her as she climbed the steps. Inside, the lobby smelled like old cigars and boiled meat. A clerk sat behind a narrow desk, half asleep with a newspaper spread in front of him. He looked up when she walked in, blinking like he wasn't sure she was real. Help you, miss? I need a room, Evelyn said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. $2 a night? Breakfast included if you're down before 8. She counted out the money, some of what Rowan had given her, and slid it across the desk. The clerk pocketed it and handed her a key. Second floor, end of the hall. Anything else? I'm meeting someone tomorrow, a man named Daniel Holloway. Have you seen him? The clerk scratched his jaw. Can't say I have, but we get folks through here all the time. What's he look like? Look. Evelyn realized she didn't know. She'd never asked, and he'd never said. The letters had been full of everything except a description. I'm not sure, she admitted. The clerk gave her a look that said he'd heard stranger things, but not by much. Well, if he's in town, you'll find him. Place ain't that big. She thanked him and went upstairs. The room was small and plain. A bed with a thin blanket, a washstand, a chair by the window. She locked the door behind her and sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap. Her heart was pounding. Tomorrow she'd meet the man who'd lied to her. The man who'd taken her money and left her stranded in the middle of nowhere. The man who'd killed Rowan's sister and ruined who knows how many other lives. And she had to smile at him, talk to him, pretend she didn't know. Evelyn stood and crossed to the window. Across the street, Rowan was leading both horses toward the livery. He moved like a man who didn't want to be noticed, keeping to the edges, his hat low. When he disappeared inside the stable, she felt suddenly, irrationally alone. She stayed at the window until full dark, watching the town settle. Lights flickered in windows. Voices drifted up from the saloon down the street. A dog barked somewhere. Eventually, she pulled the curtains, undressed down to her chemise, and lay down on top of the blanket. Sleep didn't come easy, but it came. She woke to pale gray light and the sound of boots on the stairs. For a moment, she didn't move, just listened. The footsteps passed her door and kept going. She exhaled and sat up, rubbing her face. Today. She washed with the cold water in the basin, then dressed carefully. The blue dress fit well enough, though it felt strange now, like a costume. She pinned her hair up, checked herself in the small mirror over the washstand, and tried to see what Daniel Holloway would see. A woman alone. A woman who'd come all this way for him. A woman he thought he could use. Evelyn picked up her small purse, inside it, a folding knife Rowan had given her, and went downstairs. Breakfast was served in a dim room off the lobby. A few other guests sat scattered at tables, eating in silence. Evelyn took a seat near the window where she could watch the street. The food was passable. Eggs, biscuits, coffee that tasted like it had been boiled twice. She ate because she knew she should, not because she wanted to. Halfway through, a man walked in. He was tall, maybe 40, with dark hair going gray at the temples. Well-dressed by frontier standards, clean shirt, vest, polished boots. He had the kind of face that would have been handsome once but had gone soft around the edges. He looked around the room, and when his eyes landed on Evelyn, he smiled. Her stomach dropped. He crossed to her table. "Excuse me, miss. Are you Evelyn Harper?" She set down her fork carefully. "I am." "Daniel Holloway." He held out his hand. "I'm so glad you're here." She stood and shook his hand. His grip was warm, confident. He smelled like bay rum and soap. "Please sit," he said, pulling out the chair across from her. "May I join you?" "Of course." He sat, still smiling. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the way his gaze moved over her face like he was cataloging details. Measuring her. "I can't tell you how sorry I am for the confusion," he said. "There was a miscommunication with the stage schedule, and by the time I realized you'd already arrived at Cross Hill, I was halfway to Denver on business. I rode back as fast as I could." The lie came out smooth as butter. Evelyn forced herself to smile. "I was worried." "I'm sure you were. And I don't blame you." He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "But you're here now. That's what matters." "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm here." He signaled the woman running the kitchen and ordered coffee. When it came, he took a long sip and sighed. "Terrible coffee. But I've had worse." He looked at her again. "You're even lovelier than I imagined." "Thank you. The journey must have been difficult." "It was long," Evelyn said. She kept her voice soft, a little uncertain, the kind of voice a woman in her position might have. "But I managed." "You're stronger than you look." He said it like a compliment, but something in his tone made her skin crawl. She folded her hands on the table. "You said in your letter that the ranch was ready." "It is, or it will be soon." He waved a hand vaguely. "I've been finalizing some arrangements, land deals, you understand. These things take time out here." "Where is it?" "About a day's ride west. Beautiful country. You'll love it." Evelyn tilted her head. "I'd like to see it." "Of course. We can leave tomorrow if you'd like." "Tomorrow?" "Unless you'd prefer to rest another day. I know the journey was long." She hesitated, playing the part. "No, tomorrow is fine." "Good." He smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes, or seemed to. "I promise you, Evelyn, everything I wrote in those letters was true. I want to build a life with you, a real life." She looked down at her coffee, letting him think she was moved. "That's all I want too." "Then we'll have it." They talked for another half hour. He asked about her trip, her family, her life in Philadelphia. She answered carefully, mixing truth with just enough hesitation to seem genuine. The whole time she watched him. The way he leaned in when she spoke. The way his hand rested on the table, close to hers but not touching. The way he smiled. He was good. She had to give him that. When he finally stood to leave, he took her hand again. "I have some business to attend to this afternoon, but I'll see you tonight. There's a dinner at the boarding house down the street. Nothing fancy, but the food's decent. Will you join me?" "I'd like that." 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock. He squeezed her hand gently, then left. Evelyn sat very still, watching him go. When the door closed behind him, she let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking. She stood, left money on the table, and walked out into the morning air. The street was busier now, wagons rolling past, people moving between buildings. She walked slowly, aimlessly, trying to settle her nerves. At the edge of town, she found Rowan. He was leaning against the side of the livery, hat low, whittling a piece of wood with a knife. He didn't look up when she approached, but she knew he'd seen her. "That him?" he asked quietly. "Yes." "What did he say?" "That there was a miscommunication, that the ranch is a day west, that we can leave tomorrow." Rowan's jaw tightened. "He's stalling." "Why?" "Because he's sizing you up, figuring out how much he can take before he runs." He glanced at her. "You do all right?" "I think so." "He believe you?" "I think so." Rowan nodded slowly. "Good. Keep it up. If he invites you anywhere outside of town, you tell him you're not ready yet. We need him here where I can see him. He wants to have dinner tonight. Then go. But stay in public. Don't go anywhere alone with him." Evelyn swallowed. "What if he tries something?" "He won't. Not yet. He's playing the gentleman right now." Rowan's voice was flat, cold. "But keep that knife I gave you close." She nodded. "You scared?" he asked. "Yes." "Good. Scared keeps you careful." He looked at her properly then, and his expression softened just a fraction. "You're doing fine, Evelyn. Better than fine." She wanted to believe him. "What do we do now?" "Now you go back to the hotel and rest. I'm going to ask around, see if anyone's seen him before. Tonight, you have dinner, you smile, and you keep him talking. I'll be watching." "And then?" "Then we see what he does next." Evelyn wanted to say something else, but she didn't know what. So she just nodded and walked back toward the hotel. Behind her, Rowan went back to his whittling. That evening, she met Daniel Holloway at the boarding house. It was a narrow building with a dining room that could seat maybe 20 people. Most of the tables were full. Workers, travelers, a few families. The noise and warmth were almost comforting. Daniel was already there, waiting at a table near the back. He stood when she walked in, pulling out her chair. "You look lovely," he said. "Thank you." The meal was simple: roast chicken, potatoes, bread. Daniel talked while they ate. He told her about his childhood in Ohio, his decision to come west, the challenges of starting a ranch. It all sounded plausible. It all sounded real. Evelyn listened and asked the kinds of questions a woman in love might ask. "Where did you grow up? What made you want to leave? Do you have family?" He answered easily, too easily. "What about you?" he asked after a while. "What made you answer my letter?" Evelyn looked down at her plate. "I wanted something different, something more than what I had." "And what did you have?" "A small room, a job I hated, no future to speak of." Daniel reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "You have a future now." She met his eyes. "Do I?" "Of course." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "I meant every word I wrote, Evelyn. I want a partner, someone I can build something with." "Why me?" He smiled. "Because you wrote back. Because you were willing to take a risk." He paused. "Because I could tell from your letters that you were smart, strong, the kind of woman who doesn't give up easy." The irony almost made her laugh. "I'm not as strong as you think," she said softly. "I think you're stronger than you know." She let him hold her hand a moment longer, then gently pulled away. "This is all happening very fast." "Too fast?" "I don't know. Maybe." Daniel leaned back, studying her. "I understand. You've come a long way on faith. That takes courage. But I don't want you to feel rushed." He smiled again. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Liar, she thought. They finished the meal, and Daniel walked her back to the hotel. At the door, he took her hand again. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow?" "Yes." "Good." He lifted her hand and kissed it lightly. "Sleep well, Evelyn." She watched him walk away, disappearing into the dark. Then she went upstairs, locked her door, and sat on the bed with her head in her hands. She'd done it. She'd sat across from him, smiled, let him touch her hand. And the whole time, all she could think about was Rowan's sister, about the other women, about the fact that this man was a predator and she was the bait. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "It's me," Rowan's voice low and quiet. She crossed the room and unlocked the door. He slipped inside, closing it behind him. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm fine." "He touch you?" "Just my hand." Rowan's expression darkened, but he nodded. What'd he say? That he's not going anywhere, that I should take my time. He's lying. I know. Rowan paced to the window, looked out, then turned back. I asked around. Nobody in this town knows him. Nobody's seen him before today. So he's not from here. No, he just picked it because it's small and out of the way. Rowan's voice was tight with frustration. He's planning something. I just don't know what yet. Evelyn sat down on the edge of the bed. What do we do? We wait, and we watch. He looked at her, his face hard but his eyes almost gentle. You did good tonight, Evelyn. I know it wasn't easy. It was easier than I thought it'd be. Why's that? Because I was angry the whole time. Rowan almost smiled. Anger's useful, keeps you sharp. She nodded. Then, because she had to ask, do you really think we can catch him? Yeah, I do. And if we can't, we will. She wanted to believe that, needed to. Rowan moved toward the door. Lock this behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. I won't. He paused with his hand on the knob. Get some sleep. Tomorrow might get complicated. Rowan? He turned back. Thank you, she said, for not giving up. He looked at her for a long moment. I could say the same to you. Then he was gone. Evelyn locked the door, checked the window, and lay down fully dressed. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by the sound of voices outside and the creak of the old building settling. When morning came, she felt like she hadn't slept at all. She went down to breakfast and found Daniel already waiting. Good morning, he said, bright and cheerful. Good morning. I was thinking, he said as she sat down. Why don't we take a ride today? I can show you some of the countryside. Give you a sense of what it's like out here. Evelyn's pulse quickened. A ride? Nothing far, just an hour or so, unless you'd rather stay in town. She thought about Rowan's warning. Don't go anywhere alone with him. I'd like that, she said, but I'm not much of a rider. That's all right. We'll take it slow. Maybe we could bring someone else? I saw a woman at the mercantile yesterday. She seemed kind. Daniel's smile faltered, just for a second. I was hoping it could just be the two of us, a chance to talk without all the noise. Evelyn hesitated, playing it uncertain. I don't know. Evelyn. He reached across the table. I understand you're nervous, but I promise you, I just want to spend time with you. That's all. She let him see her waver. All right, but just an hour. Just an hour. They ate quickly, and Daniel went to arrange the horses. Evelyn slipped outside and found Rowan near the livery. He wants to take me riding, she said quietly. Rowan's face went cold. Where? He didn't say, just outside of town. You tell him no. I can't. It'll look suspicious. I don't care. It's not safe. You'll follow us, won't you? Damn right I will. But if he gets you somewhere isolated, he won't. She met his eyes. I'll keep us in open country. And I have the knife. Rowan looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. You stay where I can see you. You hear me? I hear you. And if anything feels wrong, anything, you get out of there. I will. He grabbed her arm, not hard, but firm. I mean it, Evelyn. Don't take chances. I won't. He let go, his jaw tight. I'll be close. She nodded and walked back to the hotel. 20 minutes later, she and Daniel rode out of Ridgefield. The horses moved at an easy pace, and Daniel kept up a steady stream of conversation. He pointed out landmarks, a distant ridge, a creek that ran year-round, a stand of cottonwoods. He talked about the ranch again, the plans he had, the life they'd build. Evelyn listened and smiled and kept her eyes on the horizon. Rowan was out there somewhere. She couldn't see him, but she knew he was there. After about 30 minutes, Daniel reined his horse to a stop near a low rise. Let's rest here a moment. Evelyn dismounted, and he did the same. They stood together, looking out over the valley. Beautiful, isn't it? He said. Yes. He turned to her. I'm glad you came, Evelyn. I wasn't sure you would. Why wouldn't I? Because most women wouldn't. Most women would have turned around the second they saw Cross Hill Station was empty. Her stomach tightened. How did you know it was empty? He smiled. I told you. Miscommunication. Right. He stepped closer. But you didn't turn around. You waited. That tells me you're serious about this. I am. Good. His hand came up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Because I'd hate to think I wasted my time. The words hung in the air, wrong and sharp. Evelyn took a small step back. What do you mean? Daniel's smile didn't falter, but something shifted in his eyes. I mean, I've put a lot of effort into this. Letters, travel, arrangements. He tilted his head. It'd be a shame if it didn't work out. Her heart was pounding now. I don't understand. Don't you? She reached for the knife in her pocket, but he was faster. His hand clamped around her wrist, hard enough to hurt. Let go of me, she said, voice shaking. Not yet. He pulled her closer. See, here's the thing, Evelyn. I know you're not as naive as you pretend to be. I saw it at breakfast. The way you asked questions, the way you hesitated. His grip tightened. So I'm going to ask you once. Who told you? Told me what? Don't play stupid. Someone's been talking. Someone told you about me. Evelyn tried to pull free, but he held on. You're hurting me. Answer the question. I don't know what you're talking about. His other hand went to her throat. Not squeezing, just resting there. A threat. Last chance, he said quietly, and then a voice cut through the air, cold and deadly. Let her go. Daniel froze. Rowan stood 20 feet away, rifle leveled. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Daniel released Evelyn and stepped back, hands raised. Easy now. I don't want any trouble. Too late for that. Rowan's voice was flat, emotionless. Step away from her. Daniel moved slowly to the side. Evelyn stumbled back, gasping. Who the hell are you? Daniel asked. Rowan Hale. Recognition flickered across Daniel's face. Then fear. You've been hunting me, he said, for 3 years. Well, Daniel's hands were still raised, but he was smiling now. You found me. Congratulations. What now? You gonna shoot me? Thought about it. But you won't, because that'd make you a murderer. And you're not that, are you, Hale? You're one of the good ones. Rowan's finger tightened on the trigger. Don't test me. Evelyn found her voice. He knew I was lying. I know, Rowan said, eyes never leaving Daniel. Because I told him. Evelyn's breath caught. What? I sent word through the stage station 2 days ago. Let it slip that someone was asking questions about him. I wanted to see what he'd do. Rowan's jaw was tight. Didn't expect him to make a move this fast. Daniel laughed, sharp and bitter. So this was a setup. Yeah. And what? You're going to drag me to the nearest sheriff? Turn me in? That's the plan. Good luck with that. You got no proof, no witnesses, just your word against mine. Daniel's smile widened. And I'm a respectable rancher, remember? You're just some drifter with a grudge. I've got her. Rowan nodded toward Evelyn. And I've got the letters you sent. And I've got 7 other women who'll testify you did the same thing to them. 7 women who'll admit they were stupid enough to fall for a few pretty words? Yeah, that'll hold up real well in court. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice steady now. You killed his sister. Daniel's expression went cold. Prove it. I don't have to, Rowan said, because you're going to confess. Am I? Yeah, you are. And why would I do that? Rowan smiled, and it was the most dangerous thing Evelyn had ever seen. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure every woman in every town from here to California knows your face, knows your name, knows what you do. He lowered the rifle slightly. You'll never be able to run this con again. You'll be finished. Daniel's smile faded. So here's your choice, Rowan continued. You confess. You stand trial. Maybe you get prison, maybe you get worse. Or you run, and I make it my life's work to destroy yours. Silence. Daniel looked between them, his face pale now. Then he bolted. He ran for his horse, but Rowan was faster. He fired a shot into the ground in front of Daniel's feet, and the man stumbled, falling hard. Rowan was on him in seconds, rifle pressed to the back of his head. Don't move! Daniel lay there, breathing hard, face in the dirt. Evelyn walked over slowly, her whole body shaking. She looked down at the man who'd lied to her, used her, tried to hurt her, and she felt nothing but cold, hard satisfaction. Get up, Rowan said, stepping back. Daniel pushed himself to his knees, then his feet. His face was bleeding from where he'd hit the ground. Hands behind your back. Rowan pulled a length of rope from his saddlebag and tied Daniel's wrists tight. Then he looked at Evelyn. You all right? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Good, let's get him back to town. They rode back to Ridgefield with Daniel's horse tied to Rowan's. The man didn't say a word the whole way, just stared straight ahead. When they reached the sheriff's office, Rowan hauled him inside. The sheriff, a graying man with a belly that hung over his belt, looked up from his desk, startled. What's this about? This man's wanted for fraud, theft, and murder, Rowan said. And I've got proof. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. That's so. Yeah, that's so. It took 2 hours to explain everything. Rowan laid out the pattern, the letters, the women. Evelyn told her story. The sheriff listened, took notes, and sent a deputy to wire the neighboring counties. By sunset, Daniel Holloway, or whatever his real name was, sat in a cell. Evelyn stood outside the sheriff's office, watching the sky turn pink and gold. Rowan came out and stood beside her. It's not over, he said quietly. I know. There'll be a trial. You'll have to testify. I know. He looked at her. You sure you're ready for that? Evelyn thought about the women who'd come before her, the ones who hadn't been strong enough or lucky enough to fight back. Yes, she said. I'm ready. Rowan nodded slowly. Then, for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled, really smiled. You did good, Evelyn Harper. She smiled back, tired but fierce. So did you. They stayed in Ridgefield that night, but sleep didn't come easy for Evelyn. She lay in the dark listening to the sounds of the town settling, her mind replaying the moment Daniel's hand had closed around her wrist, the coldness in his eyes when the mask finally slipped. She'd known he was dangerous. Rowan had told her. But knowing something and feeling it were different things entirely. Morning came gray and cold. Evelyn dressed and went downstairs to find Rowan already in the lobby, talking to the sheriff. The older man looked tired, like he hadn't slept much either. Miss Harper, the sheriff said when he saw her. We need to talk. They sat at a corner table, away from the other guests. The sheriff pulled out a notebook, licked the tip of his pencil, and looked at her with weary eyes. I need you to go through it again, everything, start to finish. So she did. She told him about the letters, the money she'd sent, the journey to Cross Hill Station. She told him about meeting Rowan, about coming to Ridgefield, about the way Daniel had smiled at her over breakfast and threatened her in the open air just hours later. The sheriff wrote it all down in cramped handwriting, stopping her occasionally to ask for details. What exact words had Daniel used? Had he mentioned other women? Had he said anything about where he'd been before Ridgefield? Evelyn answered as best she could, but the truth was, most of what Daniel had told her were lies, and sorting through them felt like trying to pick bones out of mud. When she finished, the sheriff sat back and tapped his pencil against the table. Here's the problem, he said. What we got is fraud. Maybe theft. But murder? He looked at Rowan. You got any proof he killed your sister? Rowan's jaw tightened. They found her body 3 weeks after she went to meet him. She'd been robbed and beaten. And you know it was him how? Because she had his letters. Because she told me she was going to meet Thomas Grant, and Thomas Grant don't exist. Same as Daniel Holloway don't exist. The sheriff sighed. That's circumstantial. Any halfway decent lawyer will tear that apart. So what are you saying? I'm saying we can hold him on fraud. We can charge him with attempted assault based on what happened yesterday. But unless you got witnesses or evidence tying him directly to your sister's death, murder ain't gonna stick. Rowan's hands curled into fists on the table. He killed her. I believe you, but believing ain't the same as proving. The sheriff closed his notebook. Look, I sent wires out last night to every county within 200 miles. If he's pulled this before, and I'm guessing he has, maybe someone else has complaints. Maybe we can build a case that way. How long will that take? Evelyn asked. Days, maybe weeks. And in the meantime? In the meantime, he sits in my jail and waits. Rowan stood abruptly. I need some air. He walked out before anyone could say anything else. The sheriff watched him go, then looked at Evelyn. He's been chasing this man a long time. 3 years. That's a long time to carry hate. It's not hate, Evelyn said quietly. It's grief. The sheriff nodded slowly. Maybe. But grief like that can eat a man alive if he lets it. Evelyn thought about Rowan's face when he talked about his sister, the flatness in his voice, the way his hands never quite relaxed. He won't let it, she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. She found Rowan at the edge of town, sitting on a fence rail and staring out at the empty land. His horse stood nearby, cropping grass. Evelyn climbed up beside him. For a while they just sat there, not talking. Finally, Rowan spoke. I thought catching him would feel different. How so? I don't know, bigger, like it'd mean something. He shook his head. But he's just a man in a cell, and Claire's still dead. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The sheriff's right, Rowan continued. I got no proof, just a gut feeling and 3 years of chasing ghosts. He looked at her. If we can't make the murder charge stick, he might walk in a few years, and then he'll do it all over again. We'll find proof, Evelyn said. How? I don't know yet, but we will. Rowan studied her face. You got more faith than I do. No, I've just got less to lose. That made him smile just a little. You're stubborn as hell, you know that? So I've been told. They sat in silence a while longer. Then Rowan swung down from the fence. Come on, let's go talk to him. To Daniel? Yeah. Why? Because maybe if we push hard enough, he'll slip, say something he shouldn't. Rowan's eyes were hard. Men like him love to talk, love to brag. We just got to get him started. The sheriff didn't like the idea, but he let them in anyway. He led them down a narrow hallway to the cells. There were 3, but only one was occupied. Daniel sat on a cot with his back against the wall. When he saw them, he didn't move, just watched. Come to gloat? He asked. Come to talk, Rowan said. About what? About the women, Daniel smiled. What women? The ones you conned, the ones you stole from. Rowan stepped closer to the bars. The ones you killed. I never killed anyone. You killed Claire Hale. Don't know her. She went to meet Thomas Grant in Denver 2 years ago. Ring any bells? Daniel shrugged. I've never been to Denver. You're lying. Prove it. Rowan's hands tightened on the bars, and for a moment Evelyn thought he might try to reach through and grab the man. But he didn't. Here's what I think, Rowan said quietly. I think you've been running this game for years. I think you got sloppy once or twice, and people got hurt. And I think you don't care because to you, they're not people. They're just marks. Daniel's smile widened. That's a nice story. Got any proof? Not yet. Then I guess we're done here. Evelyn stepped forward. Why did you do it? Daniel looked at her, tilting his head. Do what? Write to me. Lie to me. Why? You really want to know? Yes. He stood and walked to the bars, stopping just a few feet from her. Because it's easy. You send a few letters, say the right things, and women like you come running, desperate, lonely, looking for someone to save them. He leaned in slightly. And the best part? You pay for the privilege. Evelyn felt anger flare hot in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. Is that what you told the others? What others? The other women. The ones who came before me. Something flickered in his eyes, just for a second. Then it was gone. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Evelyn stepped closer. You're smart. You've been doing this long enough to know how to cover your tracks, but you made a mistake with me. What mistake? You underestimated me, Daniel laughed. Did I? Last I checked, you're the one who showed up at Cross Hill Station with a trunk full of dreams and nothing else. And you're the one in a jail cell. His smile faded. Here's what I think, Evelyn said, echoing Rowan's words. I think you've gotten away with this for so long that you started to believe you were untouchable. I think you got careless, and I think somewhere out there, there's proof of what you've done. We just have to find it. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You won't. Maybe not today, but we will. She turned and walked out, and Rowan followed. In the hallway, the sheriff was waiting. Get anything? No, Rowan said, but we rattled him. Good. Maybe he'll make a mistake. Maybe. They stepped outside into the bright morning. Evelyn felt drained, like the conversation had taken something out of her she couldn't get back. You did good in there, Rowan said. I don't feel good. You stood up to him. That's more than most people can do. She looked at him. Do you really think we'll find proof? I don't know, but I'm not giving up. Neither am I. The first response came 2 days later, a wire from a sheriff in Colorado. A woman named Margaret Pruitt had filed a complaint 18 months ago against a man calling himself Jonathan Webb. The description matched. Same build, same age range, same method. He'd convinced her to send money for a ranch that didn't exist, then vanished. The second response came the next day. A marshal in Kansas reported a similar case. Different name, Samuel Cross. But the same story. By the end of the week, they had 5 confirmed cases across 3 territories. Rowan sat in the sheriff's office, reading through the wires over and over. Evelyn stood by the window, watching the street. 5, Rowan said. 5 we know about. How many do you think there really are? The sheriff asked. More. A lot more. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. This is bigger than I thought. That's what I've been trying to tell you. All right. I'll contact a territorial judge, see if we can escalate this. But it's going to take time. We don't have time, Rowan said. The longer he sits in that cell, the more likely it is some lawyer gets him out on a technicality. Then we better work fast. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the women in those wires. Margaret Pruitt, the woman in Kansas. How many others were out there, too ashamed or too afraid to come forward? She got dressed and went downstairs. The hotel was quiet, just a single lamp burning in the lobby. She slipped outside and walked through the dark streets until she reached the jail. The deputy on duty was half asleep at the desk. He looked up when she came in. Help you, miss? I need to see the prisoner. It's the middle of the night. I know, please. He hesitated, then shrugged. 5 minutes. No more. He led her back to the cells. Daniel was awake, lying on the cot with his hands behind his head. When he saw her, he sat up. Couldn't stay away? He asked. I came to ask you a question. I'm listening. Why Claire Hale? His expression didn't change. I told you, I don't know. Stop lying. Evelyn's voice was low, hard. I'm not the sheriff. I'm not a judge. I'm just someone who wants to understand, so tell me. Why her? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. You think if I tell you, it'll give you closure? Peace? I think if you tell me, it'll prove you're human. And if I'm not? Then I'll know what you really are. He stood and walked to the bars. You want the truth? Fine, I'll give it to you. He leaned in close. I didn't plan to kill her. That wasn't part of it. But she figured it out. Realized the ranch was fake, that I was lying, and she threatened to go to the law. Evelyn's breath caught. So I did what I had to do, Daniel continued. I took what little money she had left, and I made sure she couldn't talk. He tilted his head. It wasn't personal. It was just business. Evelyn felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. You're a monster. No, I'm practical. He smiled. And you can't prove any of this, because I'll deny I ever said it. I'll tell them. And who'll believe you? A desperate woman scorned by a man she barely knows? He laughed softly. Good luck with that. Evelyn stared at him, her hands shaking. Then she turned and walked out. The deputy looked up as she passed. You all right, miss? She didn't answer. Just kept walking until she was outside, gulping down cold night air. He'd confessed. He'd actually confessed. But he was right. It was her word against his. And in a courtroom, that might not be enough. She found Rowan at the boarding house, awake and sitting by the window. He looked up when she came in. Where have you been? I went to see him. Rowan's face darkened. Alone? Yes? What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking I needed answers. She sat down across from him. He confessed to killing your sister. Rowan went very still. What? He told me he killed her because she figured out he was lying. He said it wasn't personal, just business. Rowan's hands curled into fists. He told you this? Yes. Anyone else hear it? No. He swore under his breath. Then it don't matter. He'll just deny it. I know. So why'd you do it? Evelyn met his eyes. Because I needed to know if there was any part of him that felt remorse. Any part that was still human. She swallowed. There isn't. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood and paced to the window. I should have been there. It wouldn't have changed anything. Maybe not, but at least I would have heard it myself. He would have just lied to you like he lied to everyone else. Rowan slammed his fist against the wall. The sound echoed in the small room. 3 years. 3 years I've been hunting him, and now he's sitting in a cell 20 feet away and I still can't touch him. We'll find a way. How? We got fraud charges and assault, but unless we can prove he killed Claire, he's going to walk eventually. And when he does, he'll disappear and we'll never find him again. Evelyn stood. Then we make sure he doesn't walk. And how do we do that? I don't know yet. She moved closer. But I'm not giving up. And neither are you. Rowan looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. You're different than when we met. So are you. No, I'm the same, just older and meaner. He almost smiled. But you got harder, sharper. I had to. Yeah, I guess you did. They stood there in the dim light, two people held together by anger and loss and something neither of them had words for. We'll figure it out, Evelyn said quietly. Yeah, Rowan said. We will. The break came 3 days later, and it came from the last place they expected. A woman arrived in Ridgefield on the morning stage. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair and a worn traveling coat. She went straight to the sheriff's office and asked to speak to whoever was in charge of the Daniel Holloway case. The sheriff sent for Rowan and Evelyn. When they arrived, the woman was sitting in a chair by the desk, hands folded in her lap. She looked nervous, but determined. This is Miss Ada Brennan, the sheriff said. She's got something to say. Ada looked up at them. You're the ones who caught him? We are, Rowan said. Good. She took a breath. I was with him. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. With him? Not like that. I worked for him. Ada's voice shook slightly. He hired me 2 years ago to help with the letters. Said he was running a matchmaking service for lonely ranchers. I thought it was legitimate. Rowan leaned forward. What did you do? I wrote some of the letters, handled the replies, kept track of the money. She looked down at her hands. I didn't know what he was really doing. Not at first. When did you figure it out? About a year ago. A woman showed up in the town where we were staying, looking for the man she'd been writing to. He wasn't there. He'd already moved on. She had nothing, no money, no way home. I tried to help her, but Ada's voice broke. She killed herself 3 days later. The room went silent. After that, I started paying attention, Ada continued. I realized the ranches didn't exist, the men didn't exist. It was all lies, and he didn't care. When I confronted him, he said it was their own fault for being stupid enough to believe him. Why didn't you go to the law? The sheriff asked. Because I was scared. He told me if I said anything, he'd tell people I was part of it, that I'd helped him. And I just didn't know what I was helping with. She looked at Rowan. But when I heard he'd been arrested, I knew I had to come forward. I can't let him get away with this again. Rowan's voice was tight. You got proof? I kept records, names, dates, amounts, everything. She pulled a small ledger from her bag and set it on the desk. It's all in here. The sheriff picked it up and flipped through it. His eyes widened. There's got to be 30 names in here. 34, Ada said quietly. That I know of. Evelyn felt something crack open in her chest. Relief, maybe, or vindication. Why'd you keep this? Rowan asked. Insurance, in case he ever tried to pin it all on me. Ada looked at him. I'm not a good person. I helped him, even if I didn't know what I was helping with. But I'm not a murderer, and I won't protect one. The sheriff looked at Rowan. This changes things. Yeah, it does. Ada's testimony and the ledger were enough to bring formal charges of fraud and theft across multiple territories. But it was what happened next that broke the case wide open. 2 of the women listed in the ledger came forward. One from Colorado, one from Kansas. They'd both lost money to Daniel under different names. And one of them, Margaret Pruitt, the woman from the first wire, said she'd seen him in Denver around the time Claire Hale disappeared. It wasn't proof, but it was close. The territorial judge arrived a week later. He was a thin man with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. He listened to the evidence, read through Ada's ledger, and interviewed the witnesses. Then he set a trial date. The night before the trial, Evelyn sat in her hotel room, staring at the dress she'd wear. It was simple, dark blue, respectable. The kind of dress a woman wore when she wanted to be taken seriously. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Rowan. "You ready for tomorrow?" he asked. "I think so." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "It's going to be hard. He'll try to make you look foolish. His lawyer will twist everything you say." "I know." "And you're still willing to do it?" "Yes." Rowan nodded slowly. "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For not giving up. For staying when you could have run." He met her eyes. "For being stronger than I gave you credit for." Evelyn felt something tighten in her throat. "You gave me a reason to be strong." "No, you were always strong. You just didn't know it yet." They stood there in the small room, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on them. "Tomorrow, we end this," Evelyn said. "Yeah," Rowan said. "Tomorrow we do." The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the trial, and people came from all over to watch. Some were curious, some were angry, and some, like the women who'd come forward, were there to see justice done. Evelyn sat in the front row, hands folded in her lap. Rowan sat beside her, his face unreadable. Daniel was brought in wearing shackles. He looked thinner than he had a month ago, his face pale. But when his eyes found Evelyn, he smiled. She didn't look away. The judge called the court to order, and the trial began. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. He presented Ada's ledger, the testimony of the women who'd been defrauded, the pattern of lies and theft that stretched across years and territories. Daniel's lawyer fought back. He argued that the ledger was fabricated, that the women were bitter and vengeful, that there was no concrete proof his client had committed any crime. Then Evelyn was called to the stand. She walked up slowly, placed her hand on the book, and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor asked her to tell her story. So she did. She told them about the letters, the promises, the long journey to Cross Hill Station. She told them about the fear and humiliation of being stranded. She told them about meeting Rowan, about learning the truth, about coming to Ridgefield to trap the man who destroyed her life. And she told them about the moment Daniel's hand had closed around her throat. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Daniel's lawyer stood. He was a slick man with oiled hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Harper," he said, "isn't it true that you willingly came to Wyoming to marry a man you'd never met?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that you sent him money of your own free will?" "Yes." "So you made a choice, a foolish choice perhaps, but a choice nonetheless." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I made a choice based on lies." "Or based on your own desperation." "Objection," the prosecutor said. "Sustained," the judge said. "Move on, counselor." The lawyer smiled. "Miss Harper, you claim my client threatened you. But isn't it possible you misunderstood? That he was simply trying to protect himself from a woman who'd become, shall we say, unhinged?" "No." "No?" He put his hand on my throat. There was no misunderstanding. "And yet you have no bruises, no marks, no proof?" "I have my word." The word of a woman who admits she was desperate enough to travel across the country for a stranger. The lawyer shook his head. "Forgive me, Miss Harper, but that doesn't seem particularly reliable." Evelyn felt anger flare hot in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not the one on trial here. Aren't you? You're asking this court to believe that my client is a monster based solely on your version of events. But all I see is a woman who made a bad decision and is now trying to blame someone else for it. That's not... No further questions." Evelyn stepped down, shaking. Rowan caught her arm as she passed. "You did good," he whispered. But she didn't feel good. She felt like she'd been torn apart. The trial went on for 2 more days. More witnesses testified. More evidence was presented. Daniel never took the stand. On the final day, the judge called for closing arguments. The prosecutor stood and faced the jury. "Gentlemen, you've heard the evidence. You've seen the ledger. You've heard from the women this man destroyed. The question before you is simple. Do you believe them? Or do you believe a man who's made a career out of lying?" He sat down. Daniel's lawyer stood. "Gentlemen, my client is not on trial for being charming. He's not on trial for writing letters. He's on trial for fraud and theft. And the prosecution has failed to prove either beyond a reasonable doubt. Yes, women sent him money, but they did so willingly. Yes, he made promises. But promises aren't contracts. And without concrete proof that he intended to defraud these women from the beginning, you have no choice but to acquit. He sat down, looking satisfied. The judge sent the jury out to deliberate. Evelyn sat in the courtroom, barely breathing. Rowan's hand found hers, and she held on tight. 3 hours later, the jury came back. The foreman stood. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." The courtroom erupted. Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Beside her, Rowan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 3 years. The judge banged his gavel for order. When the room quieted, he looked at Daniel. "You've been found guilty of fraud, theft, and conspiracy across multiple territories. I'm sentencing you to 15 years hard labor." He paused. "And I'm recommending that the territorial marshal investigate the death of Claire Hale. If sufficient evidence is found, you'll face additional charges." Daniel's face went white. The judge banged his gavel again. "Court is adjourned." Guards led Daniel away. As he passed Evelyn, he looked at her one last time. She looked back, unflinching. Then he was gone. Outside the courthouse, the sun was setting, painting the sky red and gold. Evelyn stood on the steps, breathing in the cool evening air. Rowan came up beside her. "It's done," he said. "Not quite. They still have to investigate Claire's death." "They will. And they'll find enough. I know they will." Evelyn nodded. She felt exhausted, hollowed out, but also lighter, like something heavy had been lifted off her shoulders. "What now?" she asked. Rowan looked out at the horizon. "Now we go home." "Where's that?" He smiled faintly. "I was hoping you'd help me figure that out." Evelyn looked at him, really looked, at the lines around his eyes, the scar through his eyebrow, the way he stood like he was bracing for the next fight. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I think I can do that." They walked down the steps together, into the fading light. They left Ridgefield 3 days after the verdict. Ada Brennan had already gone, slipping away on the morning stage with a promise to testify again if the marshal needed her. The other women had returned to their lives, carrying whatever closure the trial had given them. Evelyn and Rowan were the last to go. The ride back to Rowan's ranch was quiet, not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. The land stretched out around them the same as it always had, but something felt different. Maybe it was them. When they crested the rise and saw the valley below, Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. The small cabin, the leaning barn, the creek cutting through the grass. It looked like home. They dismounted and Rowan started unloading the horses. Evelyn went inside and lit the fire, falling into the rhythm they'd built over the weeks before the trial. It felt natural now. Easy. That night they ate a simple meal, beans and cornbread, and sat by the fire. Rowan cleaned his rifle out of habit, and Evelyn mended a tear in her skirt that she'd been ignoring for weeks. "You ever think about going back east?" Rowan asked after a while. Evelyn looked up. "To Philadelphia?" "Yeah." "No, there's nothing there for me anymore." "You got family?" "A cousin in New York I haven't spoken to in 5 years. That's it." She tied off the thread and set the skirt aside. "What about you?" "No family left, just Claire, and she's gone." They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. "So what do we do now?" Evelyn asked. Rowan set the rifle down. "I've been thinking about that." And I think we got a choice. We can go our separate ways, try to build something on our own, or..." He trailed off. Or we can build something together." Evelyn's heart skipped. "What kind of something?" "I don't know yet. But this place, it's big enough for 2. And the work's easier with help." He looked at her directly. "I'm not asking you to marry me or anything like that. I'm just saying if you wanted to stay, you could." Evelyn felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. "As what? Your hired hand?" "As a partner, equal share in everything." "Why?" "Because you've earned it, and because I don't want to do this alone anymore." She studied his face, looking for anything that felt like pity or obligation. She didn't find it, just honesty. "All right," she said. "I'll stay." Rowan nodded, something like a smile crossing his face. "Good. But I have conditions." Such as, I want to learn everything. How to run this place, how to manage stock, how to keep the books. I'm not going to be dead weight. Never thought you would be. And if this doesn't work, if we can't make it, I want your word that you'll tell me straight. No protecting my feelings, no sugarcoating. You got it. Evelyn held out her hand. Partners then. Rowan took it. His grip was firm, calloused, steady. Partners. They shook on it, and something shifted between them. Not romance, not yet. Just a foundation being laid. The weeks that followed were hard work. Spring was coming, and there was a lot to do before the weather turned. Rowan taught Evelyn how to repair fence lines, how to read the land for good grazing, how to doctor a lame horse. She learned fast, asking questions when she didn't understand and pushing herself when the work got heavy. At night, they'd sit by the fire, tired and sore, and talk. Not about the trial or Daniel or the past, just about small things, the weather, the horses, plans for planting a garden. One evening, about a month after they'd returned, a rider came up the valley. Rowan saw him first and reached for his rifle out of habit, but the man raised his hand in greeting. That's the territorial marshal, Rowan said, lowering the weapon. The marshal dismounted and accepted Rowan's offer of coffee. They sat on the porch, and the marshal pulled out a folded paper. Thought you'd want to know, he said. We finished the investigation into Claire Hale's death. Rowan went very still. And? We found enough. Witnesses who saw Holloway in Denver around the time she disappeared. A shopkeeper who remembers him buying a train ticket out of town the day after her body was found. And a woman who said she saw him with a young blonde woman matching Claire's description the week before. Is that enough? Evelyn asked. It's enough to charge him with murder. The trial's set for next month. Rowan exhaled slowly. He's going to hang. If the jury convicts, yeah, he will. They sat in silence for a moment. Then the marshal stood. I know it don't bring her back, but at least he'll answer for it. Yeah, Rowan said quietly. At least there's that. The marshal rode off, and Evelyn and Rowan stayed on the porch watching the sunset. You all right? Evelyn asked. I don't know. I thought I'd feel different when this moment came. Satisfied, maybe? Or relieved. He shook his head. But I just feel tired. That's because you've been carrying this for 3 years. It's heavy. Yeah, it is. Evelyn reached over and took his hand. He didn't pull away, just held on. You did what you set out to do, she said. You caught him. And now he's going to pay. Because of you. Because of both of us. Rowan looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his eyes weren't hard. They were just sad and human. Thank you, he said. For what? For not letting me do this alone. She squeezed his hand. You wouldn't have let me either. They sat there until the stars came out, hands clasped, watching the valley fade into darkness. The next month passed in a blur of work. They fixed the barn roof, cleared a field for planting, and brought in 3 new horses Rowan had bought from a rancher 2 valleys over. The days were long and the nights were short, but Evelyn didn't mind. She liked the exhaustion, liked the feeling of building something real. Then the letter came. It arrived on a supply run to the nearest town. The postmaster handed it to Rowan with a knowing look, and Rowan read it on the ride home. When he got back to the ranch, he handed it to Evelyn without a word. It was from the territorial court. Daniel Holloway had been found guilty of murder and sentenced to hang. The execution was scheduled for 2 weeks. Evelyn read it twice, then folded it carefully. Are you going to go? I don't know. Part of me feels like I should. To see it through. And the other part? The other part thinks watching him die won't change anything, won't bring Claire back, won't undo what he did. So don't go. Rowan looked at her. You think I shouldn't? I think you've already given him 3 years of your life. Don't give him any more. He was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. You're right. I usually am? That made him smile. Just a little. When'd you get so wise? I've always been wise. You were just too stubborn to notice. He laughed. A real laugh. The first she'd heard from him in weeks. It sounded rusty, like he'd forgotten how. 2 weeks later, on the day of the execution, they didn't talk about it. They just worked. Rowan mended harnesses, Evelyn planted seeds in the small garden plot she'd cleared. When evening came, they sat on the porch and watched the sky turn purple and gold. It's done, Rowan said quietly. Yeah, it's done. He didn't say anything else, and Evelyn didn't push. They just sat there, letting the moment pass. That night, Rowan didn't clean his rifle. He just sat by the fire, staring into the flames. You ever think about what comes next? He asked. Next as in tomorrow? Or next as in the rest of our lives? The rest of our lives. Evelyn set down the book she'd been pretending to read. Sometimes. Why? Because I've spent so long focused on catching him that I didn't think about what I'd do after. And now it's after, and I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do. You keep living. That's what you do. Sounds simple when you say it like that. It is simple. It's just not easy. Rowan looked at her. You got it all figured out, don't you? No, I'm just as lost as you are, but at least we're lost together. He smiled faintly. Yeah, I guess we are. Spring turned to summer and the ranch began to take shape. The garden produced more than they could eat, so Evelyn started preserving food for winter. Rowan brought in a small herd of cattle, and they spent long days moving them to better grazing. The work was endless, but it was good work, honest work. And slowly, without either of them really noticing, something shifted. It started small. Rowan would catch himself watching Evelyn as she worked, noticing the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. Evelyn would find herself listening for the sound of his voice in the evening, feeling uneasy when he was late coming in from the range. One night, after a particularly long day, they sat on the porch with mugs of coffee. The air was warm, and fireflies flickered in the grass. You ever regret it? Rowan asked. Regret what? Coming here, staying. Evelyn thought about it. About the woman she'd been when she stepped off that stage in Cross Hill. About everything that had happened since. No, she said. I don't regret it. Even though it wasn't what you expected. Especially because it wasn't what I expected. She looked at him. I thought I was coming out here to get married and live a quiet life. Instead, I helped catch a killer and became a rancher. That's a hell of a lot more interesting. Rowan laughed. You got a strange idea of interesting. Maybe, but it's mine. He studied her face in the dim light. You're not the same woman you were when we met. Neither are you the same man. How so? You smile now. Sometimes you even laugh. That's progress. That's your fault. I'll take the credit. They sat in comfortable silence, the night settling around them. Evelyn, Rowan said after a while. Yeah? I'm glad you stayed. She felt something warm unfold in her chest. Me too. By late summer, the ranch was thriving. They had 20 head of cattle, a garden overflowing with vegetables, and enough hay stored to get them through the winter. Evelyn had even managed to trade some of their surplus for chickens, which now scratched around the yard and provided fresh eggs. One afternoon, a wagon rolled up the valley. Evelyn was in the garden, and Rowan was in the barn. She stood, shading her eyes, and saw a woman driving. It was Ada Brennan. Evelyn walked out to meet her, surprised. Ada? Hello, Evelyn. Ada climbed down from the wagon, looking nervous. I hope it's all right that I came. Of course. What are you doing out here? I've been traveling, trying to find the women from the ledger, the ones who never came forward. She hesitated. I wanted to tell them what happened, that he was caught, that he can't hurt anyone else. Evelyn felt a surge of respect for the woman. That's good of you. It's the least I can do. Ada looked around. This is a nice place. It's home. Rowan came out of the barn, saw Ada, and walked over. Miss Brennan? Mr. Hale. What brings you out here? Ada explained, and Rowan listened quietly. When she finished, he nodded. You want to stay for supper? Ada looked surprised. I don't want to impose. You're not. We got plenty. They ate together that evening, and Ada told them about the women she'd found. Some had been angry, some had cried, but all of them had been grateful to know it was over. There's one more I'm looking for, Ada said. A woman named Catherine Miller. She was one of the first, but I can't find any record of where she went. You got a description? Rowan asked. Blonde, early 30s. She was living in Missouri when she answered his letters. Rowan and Evelyn exchanged a glance. Neither of them had heard the name. If we hear anything, we'll let you know, Evelyn said. Ada nodded. Thank you. She stayed the night, sleeping in the loft, and left the next morning with a bag of vegetables and a promise to write if she found Catherine Miller. After she was gone, Evelyn and Rowan sat on the porch. You think she'll find her? Evelyn asked. I don't know. I hope so. She's doing something good, trying to make amends. Yeah, she is. Rowan looked at Evelyn. You ever think about doing something like that? Like what? Reaching out to other women, ones who might be in the same situation you were in. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. I've thought about it. And? And I don't know if I'm ready. Maybe someday. Rowan nodded. When you are, I'll help. She looked at him, surprised. You would? Yeah, I would. That night, lying in bed, Evelyn stared at the ceiling and thought about Ada's words. About the women still out there, some of them broken, some of them lost. Women who didn't know that the man who'd hurt them was gone. She thought about the woman she'd been in Philadelphia, small and scared and desperate for something more. And she thought about the woman she was now, stronger, sharper, unafraid. Maybe someday she would reach out to those women, tell them they weren't alone, tell them they could survive this. But not yet. For now, she had a ranch to run, and a partner who believed in her. That was enough. Fall came early that year, turning the valley gold and red. Evelyn and Rowan worked long days preparing for winter, cutting wood, and winterizing the cabin. The cattle were moved to lower pastures, and the chickens were brought into the barn at night to keep them safe from predators. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, Rowan came in from checking the stock and found Evelyn by the fire, sewing. Everything all right out there? She asked. Yeah, all settled. He hung up his coat and sat down across from her. We did good this year. We did. Better than I expected, honestly. Evelyn smiled. You saying you doubted me? I'm saying I doubted both of us. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. But we proved ourselves wrong. We did. He looked at her for a long moment, something unspoken in his eyes. Evelyn, I need to tell you something. Her hands stilled on the fabric. All right. When you first showed up, I didn't think this would work. I thought you'd last maybe a month before you gave up and went back east. But you didn't. He paused. You stayed, and you fought, and you made this place better just by being here. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Rowan, I'm not good at this, he continued. I'm not good at saying what I feel, but I need you to know that you're not just my partner. He stopped, searching for the words. You're the reason I remember how to be human. She set down her sewing and crossed to where he sat. She knelt in front of him, taking his hands in hers. You gave me a reason to fight when I had nothing left, she said quietly. You saw me as more than just some desperate woman. You saw me as strong, and that made me believe I could be. Rowan's hands tightened around hers. You were always strong. I just gave you a reason to use it. They stayed like that for a moment, hands clasped, the fire crackling beside them. Then Rowan leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't soft or sweet. It was raw and real and full of everything they'd been holding back for months. Evelyn kissed him back, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, anchoring herself. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. I've wanted to do that for a while, Rowan admitted. So have I. He smiled, and it reached his eyes. So what now? Now we keep building, together. Together, he agreed. That night they slept side by side for the first time, not out of necessity, but out of choice. And when Evelyn woke in the morning to find Rowan's arm draped over her waist, she didn't move. Just lay there, listening to him breathe, feeling more at home than she'd ever felt in her life. Winter settled over the valley like a blanket. The snow piled high, and the days were short and cold. But inside the cabin, it was warm. Evelyn and Rowan fell into a new rhythm, one that included stolen kisses by the fire and quiet conversations late into the night. They talked about the future, about expanding the herd, about building a second barn, about maybe hiring help when spring came. They talked about everything except the one thing that hung unspoken between them. Marriage. Neither of them brought it up. Maybe because they were both too practical, maybe because what they had felt too fragile to name, or maybe because they both knew that what they'd built was bigger than a piece of paper. One night, as a blizzard raged outside, Evelyn sat by the fire reading while Rowan repaired a bridle. The wind howled, rattling the windows, but inside it was quiet and safe. "You ever think about Claire?" Evelyn asked suddenly. Rowan looked up. "All the time. Do you think she'd approve of this, of us?" He set down the bridle and thought about it. "Yeah, I think she would. She always said I needed someone who'd call me on my bullshit." Evelyn laughed. "She sounds like she was smart." She was. Too smart for her own good sometimes. His expression softened. "She would have liked you. I wish I could have met her." "Me too." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past settling gently between them. "I think about the women from the ledger sometimes," Evelyn said. "The ones Ada's looking for. I wonder if they're all right. Some of them probably are. Some probably aren't. Do you think we made a difference, catching him?" "Yeah, I do." Rowan looked at her. "Maybe we didn't save everyone, but we saved the ones who would have come after you. That counts for something." Evelyn nodded. "I want to do more." "Then we will, when you're ready." She met his eyes. "I'm almost ready." "Good, because I think you'd be damn good at it." The blizzard lasted 3 days. When it finally broke, the world outside was buried under 2 feet of snow. Rowan and Evelyn dug themselves out, clearing paths to the barn and the well, checking on the animals. Everything had survived. As they stood in the yard, surveying the white expanse, Evelyn felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was her life now. Not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd dreamed of in Philadelphia, but it was hers. And it was real. And that was more than enough. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it came fast. The snow melted in rushing streams, the grass turned green overnight, and the valley filled with the sound of birds returning from the south. Evelyn stood in the doorway of the cabin one morning, coffee in hand, watching the world wake up. Behind her, Rowan was getting dressed. They'd fallen into the habit of sharing the bed through the winter, and neither of them had suggested going back to separate arrangements. It felt natural. "Right. You planning to stand there all day?" he asked, pulling on his boots. "Maybe. It's nice. It'll still be nice after we get the work done." She smiled and took another sip of coffee. Always so practical. One of us has to be. They spent the morning checking fence lines and moving the cattle to fresh pasture. The herd had grown over the winter. 2 calves born in February, both healthy. Evelyn had helped deliver them, her hands bloody and shaking, while Rowan talked her through it. She'd never forget the feeling of those first breaths, the way the calves had struggled to their feet minutes after being born. Life finding a way. That's what it was. Around noon, they stopped to rest by the creek. Rowan splashed water on his face while Evelyn sat on a flat rock, letting the sun warm her shoulders. "I've been thinking," she said. "About?" "About what Ada's doing, finding those women." Rowan sat down beside her. "You want to help her?" "I want to do something like it. Not exactly the same, but similar." She looked at him. "There are women out here who have nowhere to go. Women who get thrown out or run away or end up stranded like I did. I want to give them a place. Here? Maybe. Or somewhere nearby. A place where they can stay until they get on their feet. Learn skills, figure out what comes next." Rowan was quiet for a moment, considering. "That's a big undertaking." "I know. You'd need money, space, help." "I know that too. And you'd be taking on other people's problems, their trauma, their baggage." "I know." She met his eyes. "But I have to try, because nobody tried to help me. I got lucky that you showed up when you did. But what about the women who don't get lucky?" Rowan nodded slowly. "All right, then we'll do it." "We? You think I'm going to let you take on something like that alone? We're partners, remember?" Evelyn felt warmth spread through her chest. "Yeah, we are. So where do we start?" "I don't know. I guess we figure it out as we go." Rowan smiled. Story of our lives. They spent the next few weeks planning. Evelyn wrote letters to Ada, to the women who'd testified at the trial, to anyone she thought might have information or resources. Rowan started looking into acquiring more land, maybe the abandoned homestead 2 valleys over, the one with the old house that just needed fixing up. Responses came slowly at first. then faster. Ada wrote back with names of women who might need help. One of the women from the trial, Margaret Pruitt, sent money. Not much, but enough to get started. Others sent words of encouragement. And then, in late April, the first woman arrived. Her name was Sarah. She was 19, rail-thin, with a baby on her hip and fear in her eyes. She'd walked 8 miles from the nearest town after her husband had thrown her out for reasons she didn't want to talk about. Evelyn took one look at her and knew. "Come inside," she said. "You're safe here." Sarah stayed in the loft. She was quiet at first, barely speaking except to tend to her baby. But slowly, over days and then weeks, she began to open up. She told Evelyn about the marriage she'd been forced into at 16, about the beatings, about the night she'd finally had enough and left with nothing but the clothes on her back and her daughter. Evelyn listened without judgment, and when Sarah asked if she could stay longer, Evelyn said yes without hesitation. Sarah started helping around the ranch. She was good with the chickens, patient and gentle. She learned to milk the cow, to churn butter, to preserve food. And slowly, the fear in her eyes began to fade. One evening, as they worked together in the garden, Sarah spoke quietly. "Why are you doing this?" Evelyn looked up from the carrots she was thinning. "Doing what?" "Helping me. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. I know what it's like to have nowhere to go. And I know what it's like when someone gives you a chance." Evelyn straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. "Somebody helped me when I needed it most. Now I'm helping you. Maybe someday you'll help someone else." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me. Just keep going. That's enough." By summer, there were 3 women staying at the ranch. Sarah and her baby, a widow named Charlotte, who'd lost everything in a fire, and a young woman called Jane who'd run away from a brothel in Denver. The cabin was crowded, but they made it work. Rowan built a second structure, small and rough, but solid, where Charlotte and Jane slept. Evelyn taught them all how to shoot, how to ride, how to read land and weather. Charlotte turned out to have a talent for sewing and started mending clothes for the others. Jane was quiet but strong, and she took to ranch work like she'd been born to it. And slowly, something remarkable happened. The women began to heal. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. There were nightmares and tears and days when someone couldn't get out of bed. But there were also moments of laughter, shared meals, quiet conversations by the fire. One night, Evelyn sat on the porch with Rowan, watching the women inside through the window. They were teaching Sarah a card game, and the sound of their laughter drifted out into the warm evening air. "We're going to need more space," Rowan said. "I know, and more help. I can't keep up with the ranch work and the building." "I know that too." He looked at her. "You really think we can do this? Make it work long term?" "I don't know, but we're doing it now. That's enough for today." Rowan reached over and took her hand. "You're something else, you know that?" "So are you." They sat in comfortable silence, fingers intertwined, watching the stars come out. In August, a letter arrived from the territorial government. Rowan read it twice, then handed it to Evelyn. It was an offer. If they officially established a women's refuge, what the letter called a sanctuary station, the territory would provide a small stipend to help with costs. Not much, but enough to make a difference. Evelyn stared at the letter, hardly believing it. "Is this real?" "Looks real to me." "They're actually going to help us." "Seems like it." She laughed, sudden and bright. "We're actually going to do this." Rowan smiled. "Yeah, we are." They accepted the offer and officially registered the ranch as a sanctuary station. Word spread. More women came, some sent by sheriffs or marshals, some finding their way on their own. Evelyn and Rowan moved into the smaller building to make room, giving the cabin over to the women and children. By fall, there were 7 women living on the ranch, and Evelyn had hired 2 men from town to help with the heavy work. The place was bustling, chaotic, loud. Nothing like the quiet life Evelyn had imagined back in Philadelphia. It was better. One October evening, after the work was done and the women had gone to bed, Evelyn and Rowan sat by the fire in their small quarters. Rain drummed on the roof, steady and soothing. "You ever regret it?" Rowan asked. "Staying here? Doing this?" Evelyn looked at him, surprised. "No, never. Why?" "Because this isn't what you signed up for. You came out here thinking you were going to be a rancher's wife, living a quiet life. Instead, you're running a refuge and dealing with other people's problems every day. That's true, but it's also not the whole truth. She set down the book she'd been reading. When I left Philadelphia, I wasn't running toward something. I was running away, away from loneliness, away from a life that felt empty. And yeah, I thought marriage would fill that emptiness, but it wouldn't have. Not really. How do you know? Because what fills it isn't another person. It's purpose. It's knowing that what you're doing matters. She looked at him. This matters. These women matter. And I'd rather be here, doing this, than anywhere else in the world. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, slow and deliberate. When they pulled apart, his eyes were serious. Marry me. Evelyn's breath caught. What? Marry me. Not because you need to, not because it's expected, but because I want to spend the rest of my life building this with you. As your husband, as your partner, as whatever you need me to be. She felt tears prick her eyes. Rowan, you don't have to answer now. Just think about it. I don't need to think about it. She cupped his face in her hands. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. He smiled, and it was the most unguarded thing she'd ever seen on his face. Yeah? Yeah. He kissed her again, and this time it was full of relief and joy and promise. They were married in November by the circuit judge who came through every few months. The ceremony was simple, held in the yard with the women and the hired hands as witnesses. Sarah had sewn Evelyn a new dress, pale yellow, practical but pretty. Charlotte had baked a cake. Jane had picked wildflowers that were somehow still blooming despite the cold. It wasn't grand, it wasn't fancy, it was perfect. That night, lying in bed with Rowan's arm around her, Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, desperate, afraid, willing to marry a stranger just to escape her life. She'd come here looking to be saved. Instead, she'd learned to save herself. And in doing so, she'd found something bigger than she'd ever imagined. Winter came, and with it new challenges. One of the women, Charlotte, decided to leave. She'd saved enough money and had family in Colorado willing to take her in. Evelyn helped her pack and sent her off with supplies and a promise that she was always welcome back. 2 new women arrived to take her place, and then 3 more. The work was endless, exhausting. Some days Evelyn fell into bed so tired she couldn't think. But it was good work, work that mattered. In January, Sarah made an announcement. She'd been offered a job in town, working at the general store. The pay was decent, and the storekeeper's wife had agreed to watch the baby while Sarah worked. I think I'm ready, Sarah said, to try on my own. Evelyn felt pride swell in her chest. Then you should go. I'm scared. That's normal, but you're stronger than you think. You've proven that. Sarah hugged her tight. I wouldn't have made it without you. Yes, you would have. You just needed time to remember how. Sarah left the next week, taking her baby and the skills she'd learned and the confidence she'd built. Evelyn watched her ride away and felt something settle in her soul. This was why she did it. Not to keep women dependent, but to give them the tools to stand on their own. Spring came again, marking 3 years since Evelyn had stepped off the stage at Cross Hill Station. The ranch was barely recognizable now. There were 3 buildings, a large garden, a thriving herd, and usually 8 to 10 women in residence at any given time. Evelyn stood in the yard one morning, watching the sun rise over the valley. Rowan came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. You know what today is? He asked. What? 3 years since we met. She leaned back against him. Has it really been that long? Yeah, it feels like longer, and also like no time at all. I know what you mean. They stood there together, watching the light spread across the land. You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't shown up that day? Rowan asked. Sometimes, but not often. Why not? Because it doesn't matter. You did show up, and everything that came after was because we chose it, both of us. Rowan kissed the top of her head. I love you. You know that? I know. I love you too. They'd never said it before. Not in so many words, but it felt right to say it now. One afternoon in late spring, a wagon rolled up the valley. Evelyn was in the garden and looked up to see Ada Brennan driving, just like she had 2 years before. But this time, she wasn't alone. A woman sat beside her. Blonde, early 30s, with tired eyes and careful posture. Evelyn set down her tools and walked to meet them. "Hello, Evelyn," Ada said, climbing down. "I brought someone." The blonde woman climbed down slowly, looking around with obvious apprehension. "This is Catherine Miller," Ada said quietly. Evelyn's breath caught. Catherine Miller, the woman Ada had been searching for. The first one. "Hello," Evelyn said gently. Catherine nodded but didn't speak. "She's been through a lot," Ada said. "More than most. I finally found her 3 weeks ago in a mining town up north. She was—" Ada trailed off. "She needs help." Evelyn looked at Catherine and saw herself 3 years ago. Lost. Broken. Unsure if there was anything left worth saving. "You're safe here," Evelyn said, "for as long as you need." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you help me?" "Because someone helped me once, and because you deserve it." Catherine stayed, and like the others before her, she began to heal. It was slow, painful. There were setbacks. But Evelyn was patient. She'd learned that healing wasn't linear, that some wounds ran deep, but she'd also learned that people were stronger than they knew, and that sometimes all they needed was someone to believe in them until they could believe in themselves. By summer, Catherine was working in the garden alongside Evelyn. They talked while they worked, about small things at first, then bigger ones. "I used to think I was weak," Catherine said one day, "for falling for his lies, for believing him." "You weren't weak. You were human. I should have known better. He was good at what he did. That's not your fault." Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then, "How did you do it? How did you move past it?" Evelyn straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I stopped blaming myself, and I started using what happened to help other people. It doesn't erase what he did, but it takes away his power over me." "Does it get easier?" "Yes. Not quickly, but yes." Catherine nodded slowly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For showing me it's possible." That fall, Evelyn and Rowan hosted a harvest celebration. All the women helped prepare, cooking, decorating, setting up tables in the yard. They invited people from town, the hired hands, even the territorial judge who'd helped them get the sanctuary station recognized. As the sun set and the food was served, Evelyn looked around at the faces gathered there. Women who'd been broken and were now whole. Men who'd chosen to help instead of hurt. A community built not on blood or obligation, but on choice and care. Rowan appeared at her elbow, handing her a cup of cider. "Happy?" he asked. "Yeah, I am." "Good, you should be. You built this." "We built this." "You started it. I just helped." She leaned into him. "We're a good team." "The best." As the evening wore on and the stars came out, someone started playing a fiddle. People danced, clumsy and laughing. Evelyn watched Sarah twirl her daughter around, the little girl shrieking with delight. Watched Catherine smile, really smile, for the first time since she'd arrived. And she thought about the letters that had brought her here, the lies that had turned into something true. She'd come to Wyoming looking for a husband, for someone to save her. Instead, she'd found herself, found her strength, found her purpose. And in the process, she'd built something that would outlast her, a place where broken women could become whole, where the lost could find their way. That night, lying in bed with Rowan, Evelyn spoke into the darkness. "Do you think Claire would be proud of what we've done?" Rowan was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, I think she would be. I think she'd say we took something terrible and made it mean something. That's all we can do, isn't it? Take the bad things and try to make them mean something." "Yeah, that's all any of us can do." Evelyn rolled over to face him. "I used to think strength was about not needing anyone, about being able to do everything yourself. And now? Now I think strength is knowing when to ask for help and knowing when to offer it." Rowan pulled her close. "You're the strongest person I know." "So are you." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two people who'd been broken and put themselves back together with purpose and love and sheer stubborn will. 5 years after Evelyn arrived in Wyoming, the sanctuary station was known throughout the territory. Women came from as far as 300 miles away, sent by lawmen and clergy and other women who'd passed through and found their footing. The original ranch had expanded to include 4 buildings, a schoolhouse where Evelyn taught reading and writing, and a workshop where the women learned trades. Some stayed a few weeks. Some stayed months. A few stayed permanently, becoming part of the staff. Sarah came back to visit once a year, bringing her daughter. She'd married the storekeeper's son and was expecting her second child. Catherine had moved to town and opened a boarding house for working women. Jane had bought land of her own and was raising horses. And there were others, so many others, each one a story of survival, of strength, of refusing to let the worst thing that happened to them be the only thing that defined them. One spring morning, 10 years after she'd stepped off that stage, Evelyn stood on the porch of the main house and looked out over the valley. Rowan came out and stood beside her, his hair starting to gray at the temples. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different this is from what I imagined." "Better or worse?" "Different. Better in ways I couldn't have predicted, harder in others." She looked at him. "But I wouldn't change it." "Neither would I." A young woman, new, arrived just yesterday, came out of the house looking uncertain. Evelyn smiled at her. "Morning. Did you sleep all right?" "Yes, ma'am, thank you." "I'm making breakfast. You hungry?" The girl nodded, still wary. "Come on then, let's get you fed." As they went inside, Rowan caught Evelyn's hand and squeezed it. She squeezed back. This was the life she'd built. Not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd been promised in those letters all those years ago. But it was real, and it was hers. And every woman who walked through that door was proof that the worst thing didn't have to be the end of the story, that there was always a chance to start again, to become something more than what had been done to you. Evelyn had learned that the hard way, and now she spent her days teaching it to others. The man who'd tried to destroy her was gone, hanged years ago for his crimes, but she was still here, still standing, still fighting, still saving women who thought they couldn't be saved. And in doing that, she'd saved herself over and over again. That was the truth she'd learned in Wyoming, that salvation wasn't something someone else gave you. It was something you built with your own hands, one hard day at a time, until you looked back and realized you'd constructed an entire life worth living, a life that mattered, a life that was hers. Evelyn Harper had come to Wyoming to marry a man who didn't exist. Instead, she'd found a man who was real, and more importantly, she'd found herself. And that, she thought, as she stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast for women who needed what she'd once needed, was the only happy ending that ever really mattered. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And enough.